You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 5th of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, Donald Trump had a day in Washington yesterday. Travel bans, Biden investigations, and the end of a bromance with Elon Musk. We'll be joined from DC by Simon Marks. Then we'll be joined right here at Midori House by our Paris bureau chief, Simon Bouvier. Simon, what do you have for us?
Well, Chris, we're going to be talking about France's accounting headaches, crunch time for negotiations on pension reform, and how to find 40 billion euros for next year's budget.
Good luck with that, France. Thank you, Simon. After that, we'll hear why the Dutch royal family is in Prague. We'll get a roundup of shipping news, and finally, it would not be a Thursday without the global countdown. But Fernando Augusto Pacheco, you have a special one for us this week.
Very special, Chris. Today I'll take you on a musical journey to 70s and 80s Brazil.
All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. We will start in Washington, D.C., where there's been even more than the usual flurry of activity over the past few days. A travel ban announced on 12 countries, an investigation of Joe Biden's mental faculties, a call with Vladimir Putin, Germany's Friedrich Merz on an official visit, tariff deadlines, and Elon Musk opening fire on the big, beautiful bill making its way through Congress. The bromance between Musk and Trump appears to be well and truly over. Well, I'm joined now by Simon Marks, Washington reporter. Simon, good to have you back on the show. As I said there is a dizzying amount happening at the moment. Is this par for the course or something a bit different in the air this week? An air of distraction, perhaps? Death by 1,000 cuts? I don't know what to call it.
Well, Chris, I think it's definitely par for the particular course down which we are currently travelling here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump had a very difficult day on Wednesday because Elon Musk, his now former partner in crime, the former head of the Department of Government Efficiency, who departed the White House after that ceremony in the Oval Office last Friday that was absolutely designed to paper over any notion that there was disagreement between President Trump and Elon Musk. All of that has now been completely torpedoed by Elon Musk's insistence that the president's tax and spending bill, that of course is currently going through Congress, is a massive abomination. And Elon Musk, by the end of the day yesterday, was determined to kill the bill, as he put it, in a relentless slew of social media postings. So the White House, and Donald Trump particularly, reached for their traditional playbook, a flurry of executive orders being signed, hastily disseminated to the media right around the dinner hour here in the United States, in an effort, I think, to distract the attention of the commentariat, but also the electorate, from the difficulties that Donald Trump is facing on a number of different fronts, not just with his tax and spending bill, that call with Vladimir Putin, the president conceding that it was not going to yield peace in our time. Once again, Vladimir Putin seeking to kick the can down the road, and Donald Trump facing challenges on a whole variety of fronts. So seeking to change the conversation with that flurry of executive orders.
Well, and he successfully changed some of the conversation, certainly in the media and the commentariat. But I'm curious about politicians as well. Have there been signs of different politicians taking sides between Musk and Trump on this? Because this massive legislative bill is trying to make its way through the Senate. It will impact debt. Do you get any sense that the tide is turning, emboldening others perhaps to speak up?
I think positions are hardening. The important thing I think to underscore, Chris, is that this tax and spending bill is the flip side to Donald Trump's trade war coin. The White House now concedes that the president's tariffs are going to lead to supply chain issues and price rises in the United States as we head towards particularly the Christmas season. The tax and spending bill is designed to create economic stimulus to offset what administration officials have long argued will be the blip that is created dominated by the tariffs and the protectionism. So Donald Trump needs this whopping massive piece of legislation to get passed, and he wants to get it passed in his ideal world by Independence Day, by July the 4th, and the big holiday that America will be celebrating. Elon Musk now threatening to torpedo it. What he's also demanding is a substantial rewrite of the bill. Were that to happen, it would significantly delay the bill's progress through the Senate. And then, of course, the new bill would have to go back to the House of Representatives to be voted on and approved by Republican lawmakers there. Elon Musk knows that he's only got to chip away a little bit at Donald Trump's support on Capitol Hill to enjoy success. It only takes 4 senators to decide they don't want to back this bill, and it will be derailed given the very thin margin of majority that Republicans enjoy in the Senate. Very thin margin, of course, in the House of Representatives as well. So some members of the Senate on the Republican side definitely emboldened by all of this. People like Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, but they have long expressed hostility to some of the president's plans for public expenditure and for fueling the country's deficit. We learned yesterday from the Congressional Budget Organization, the CBO, that the deficit will indeed be fueled by about $2.5 trillion as a result of Donald Trump's proposed measures. So they've been emboldened in opposition, but we're also hearing from many Republicans in the House of Representatives who say, look, Elon Musk is not an elected lawmaker. He doesn't get to make demands for legislation to be rewritten. He is overstepping his bounds here. And the real question is how successful the whipping operation that the White House will now be engaging in to rally support around Donald Trump proves to be.
Simon, we only have maybe another minute, but a quick question on the foreign policy, because you mentioned Vladimir Putin, the call that Trump had there, Trump admitting that peace talks are basically going nowhere fast. Again, the question then, why no serious pressure on Putin?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting question because even in the readout of that call yesterday, Chris, Donald Trump reported to the world that Vladimir Putin told him that he needs to respond to Ukraine's attack, that audacious assault by drones on Russia's air capabilities. He needs to respond very strongly. What we didn't learn from the president's readout of the call was whether Donald Trump made any representations to Vladimir Putin not to respond very strongly and instead to focus on the calls for a 30-day ceasefire. Instead, Vladimir Putin suddenly appears to have suggested to Donald Trump that he, the Russian leader, should get involved in the talks that are underway with the Iranians, with the United States seeking to curtail Iran's nuclear aspirations. And Donald Trump, certainly from the readout that he offered of the call, seemed beguiled by that idea. So many commentators here were arguing, Vladimir Putin had kind of played Donald Trump. He changed the subject matter of the discussion, deflecting the conversation away from Ukraine and suddenly injecting this idea that Vladimir Putin should be involved in the Iran talks. None of this is going to advance even discussions about a 30-day ceasefire, much less the long-term hopes for some kind of cessation of hostilities.
Simon, there is so much we could speak about, but we're going to have to leave it there. Simon Marks in Washington, D.C., thank you very much for joining us. And now here's Laura Kramer with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Donald Trump has banned travel from 12 countries to the United States, including Afghanistan, Haiti, and Iran. He says the move will protect Americans from dangerous foreign actors. The U.S. president also added partial restrictions for 7 more countries, including Venezuela and Cuba. Dual citizens are not affected. China has stopped exports of key minerals hitting car makers in Europe. Some factories have paused production. China makes nearly 90% of the world's rare minerals, and the export ban is part of its trade fight with the U.S. And the Nintendo Switch 2 has been released worldwide, with some stores opening at midnight for fans. The new console is selling fast despite its $450 price tag. Experts say it could mark a new boom for the video game industry. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Laura. Now, from deficit-busting tax-cutting legislation in the United States to a controversial effort to get the budgetary house in order in France. Prime Minister François Bayrou is planning to unveil a budget for next year that will include public spending limits and tax increases that will no doubt undermine a government already incredibly unstable. If that weren't enough, there is also a meeting on pensions today. And when did issues like retirement age ever cause problems in France? I'm joined now by Monocle's Paris Bureau Chief Simon Bouvier. You are right here at Midori House. Good afternoon,
Bonjour, Chris. I am. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here to talk about France and the always fun politics. This could be a dry story about the budget, but as ever, there are political machinations. Tell us, first of all, what Bayrou is planning to outline.
Yes, the accounting drama is what we're going to be bringing today. Essentially, Chris, the big shift that we've seen is that until now, the conversations about how to rein in runaway French government public spending has been, we've made so much progress on cutting taxes since President Macron came to power. We don't want to touch that. We only want to cut spending, and we don't want to increase taxes. Well, to get the 2025 budget through, even though they had promised to make it a balanced effort and to even to cut more spending than they raised with taxes, it ended up, the savings that they found there ended up being almost exclusively new taxes on large multinational corporations, French corporations that are doing well, and the wealthiest individuals. So now it's kind of crunch time to attack the structural problem, which is that France has the highest level of public spending in the European Union, and they're getting in trouble with the EU for that. So the French government has promised the European Union that it would start cutting significantly its public spending, and next year is the critical year to get that under control.
It is the critical year to get it under control. That does not mean by any way, shape, or form that it will be easy. Is there any sense that Bayrou would have enough support in a very difficult government situation to actually get any of this through?
I think the name of the game for him, similarly to last year, is to keep the kind of moderate left socialists on side. But as usual with him, he's been very vague about how he's going to achieve his goals. But again, the big shift is instead of saying we're not going to increase taxes, we're just going to cut public spending, the government is now saying we're going to have to do both. So there's a big, and it's kind of early to start these budget talks, but they know exactly what they're doing because they know that both the tax increases and the budget cuts are going to be very unpopular. And so they're going to have to sell that to Parliament and to the public. That's why they're starting to talk about it now, even though they don't need to pass it until the end of the year. And
is there a chance that the socialists would actually back something like this? I mean, this is painful medicine for France.
Yes, I think it depends on the balance. They don't want to be seen as backing an austerity budget. But if they can point to, look, all of these taxes on the wealthiest individuals and on corporations have increased, and we also got concessions on this extremely unpopular pension reform, for instance, then that's something that they can sell, especially because the party it doesn't have a very hardline position on these things. It's just that if it's just an austerity budget, then they won't have a choice but to kind of leave the table.
Simon, a word on this pension thing that you did touch on there. This has been an ongoing thing, a group that's been meeting to try and deal with the 2023 pension reforms. Is it, as ever, all about the retirement age, or is there more to it?
I think there's a lot more to it, Chris, in terms of actually fixing the problem, because there are a number of levers that both the corporations or the representatives of the employers and the unions that represent the employees can use in order to get to the balance that they're looking for from an accounting perspective. But in the public sphere, the whole ball game is, are they going to change the retirement age and come back down from 64? That's all anybody is interested in. And so I think at the margins, the best that Bayrou can hope for, back in April, he called this conclave, he called it, forcing, in his words, I think it's a bit of a kind of PR stunt, but it explains the concept well, forcing the representatives of the employers and the representatives of the employees to come together and come to a solution to balance the pension system. If they go back on the retirement age and bring it back down from 64 to 63, for example, but increase the number of years that it is mandatory to contribute to the system in order to get a pension, then you could get a math that adds up, and you could get a situation where the left-leaning participants can call this a win.
Good math and possible white smoke from the French pension conclave. Simon
Let's see.
Bouvier, our Paris bureau chief, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak. To the Czech Republic now, which is welcoming royalty today. And while monarchs typically don't have much power these days, the Dutch king and queen have been more instrumental than most in securing military aid for Ukraine, working with the Czechs to bring ammunition to the front line. The Dutch monarchs have been visiting Prague this week, and Queen Maxima will be unveiling a bell made from shell casings that were gathered on the Ukrainian battlefield today. I'm joined now by Rob Cameron, journalist in Prague. Rob, thanks very much for coming back on the show. Tell us first of all about this partnership on ammunitions between the Dutch monarchs and the Czechs.
Absolutely, Chris. Well, the Czech Ammunition Initiative, as it is now called, has been running for about 2.5 years, I think, and has recently been scaled up to supply Ukraine with well over 1 million ammunition shells, 1 million rounds of ammunition a year. And what they do is that they find these shells on the global arms market using various contacts through the Czech Defense Ministry and so on. They go to various defense manufacturers around the world, buying up ammunition on the global arms market, and then sorting out the logistics and permits and so on to bring that ammunition to Ukraine. And it's paid for by a number of Western allies, NATO and EU allies, and the Netherlands is very heavily involved in both the financing and the organization of this initiative.
Tell us more about the Dutch role, and particularly that of the monarchs in this. Do we know how that came about? And as a result, I guess, how the Dutch monarchs, the royals, are being welcomed in Prague? They must be quite a popular force.
They are. To be honest, the role of, the most senior officials in this whole story is still rather shrouded in mystery. It's not quite clear exactly whose idea the ammunition initiative was in the first place. Some say it was the Czech president, Petr Pavel, who is a former number 2 at NATO, who actually came up with the idea. Others say, no, it wasn't him. It was an official in the defense ministry. And the initiative actually began even before the Russian invasion, full-scale invasion in February 2022. But certainly, it's fair to say that both President Pavel and, of course, the Dutch king and others have been very vocal in their support for Ukraine. And that very much was the tone of today's ceremony at the Prague Church of the Most Holy Saviour, when this bell made of spent used artillery shell casings, rockets and missiles was unveiled in Prague.
And tell us more about the bell, exactly what it is and kind of what that moment was like with Queen Maxima there as well. It is quite a symbolic gesture.
Very symbolic, yes. It was, as I say, it was cast in the Netherlands, and the Dutch basically organized the collection of these fragments of artillery shells and rockets and missiles and so on. They were then melted down in the Netherlands. It was done at the Royal Ijsbolt Bell Foundry. I hope I pronounced that correctly, in cooperation with the Dutch embassy in Prague and also a local heritage organization here in the Czech capital called Sanctus Castellus. So they melted it down, and they've spent the last few months creating this bell, which at the moment has been installed in the church in Prague, but it will at some point be lifted up into the belfry where it will become a permanent fixture of the church. And actually, the clapper of the bell features part of a Russian S-300 missile that was fired on Ukraine. So that gives you a sense of the symbolism surrounding this project.
Yeah, an incredible amount of symbolism in terms of what was gathered for that. Rob Cameron, journalist in Prague, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. It is time now for a roundup of news from the world of shipping. And for that, I am joined from Paris by the Director of Control Risks Maritime Security, Cormac McGarry. Cormac, thanks very much for coming on the show. We wanted to start with the latest from the Baltic Sea, where Russia has been providing naval escorts for commercial ships. What can you tell us?
Thanks for having me, Chris. Well, actually, this came from a statement from Finland's defense minister saying that they have observed Russia providing naval escorts to commercial ships, but we have not seen any evidence of it quite yet. That's not to say it's not happening. Why is that significant? What's been happening, particularly since around October, late 2024, is there's been this kind of tit-for-tat escalation between Northern European states and Russia in what we call grey zone activity. Now, essentially, for a number of years now, Russia has been playing around in European waters with subsea infrastructure. We're probably all familiar with cable cutting and that kind of activity. And from late 2024, we finally saw some European states come back with a more robust response, and that started with the seizure of a vessel called the Eagle S. Without getting too into the murky details, which I happily can if you wish, there's been maybe 7 or 8 vessel seizures of that type since, and Russia has responded in kind. And then this really came to a fore in May when another vessel was Estonia attempted to seize a vessel called the Jaguar. The Jaguar had been sanctioned by the UK. Estonia was essentially going to carry out enforcement of sanctions to prevent the Jaguar from lifting an oil and gas cargo. The Russian response, so in the air, there's an Estonian helicopter, an Estonian aircraft called a Skytruck, and there's vessels on the water. Russia responds by sending an Su-35 jet up to basically tell the Estonians, you're not taking this ship. And then later, and this is all captured on by the crew on the deck. This imagery is openly available. And then later on, Portugal, as part of NATO, launched an F-16 from Estonia. Now, thankfully, nothing happened in the air, but there is an unprecedented level of grey zone activity that has now erupted into military assets coming face to face with each other on the water and in the air in the Baltic. And so it's in that context, after that incident, that Finland has said that they believe that Russia is now providing those naval escorts. That would be a step from Russia to say, if you want to take any of these commercial ships, you will have to come up against a Russian naval asset, a military asset, in order to do it. And that puts the ball right back in Europe's court to say, are you willing to escalate further?
It is quite incredible how much of a link there has been between commercial shipping and military activity in the Baltic Sea. But Cormac, I wanted to move on to a different issue because we've talked a little bit on this show about the tariff battles, certainly have in the last week or so, with Donald Trump really upending supply chains around the world. And there has been a particular focus on Chinese ships entering the United States. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and so, you know what, I'm going to avoid saying specific numbers here because they keep changing and there's no certainty on them. But in short, what was proposed by the Trump administration at the beginning of their term, well, their second term, as part of controlling Chinese influence in the American sphere, would be to impose a fee on any ship coming to the United States if that ship was built in China. Why is that significant? If you have a ship, chances are it's built in China. It's very unlikely to have been built anywhere else other than China or South Korea. And it's far more likely it was China. This is a message to the shipping industry to get your shipbuilding out of total Chinese control. Now, we can debate whether that's even physically possible, where you would remove that shipbuilding. But in short, what that's doing to the shipping industry, it's forcing them to think strategically about the future of the very thing that is the fundamental basis of their industry, which is the ships themselves. So lately, literally within the last week, there's been reports emerging that European banks are positioning themselves to take advantage of this. So as the ship owners move away from Chinese shipbuilding, they'll also move away from Chinese funding from banks for those ships to be built. And so we've heard that European banks are positioning themselves to jump on that and be the funders of future shipbuilding. Now, again, the question is, where are those ships going to be built? If these fees do come in eventually, if they do actually happen, and ship owners start having to pay fines to enter the US, it will cost them significant amounts. So if the fees come in, they will have to do something about it.
So many different fees running around. Cormac McGarry, Director of Control Risks at Maritime Security. Thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing. And finally on today's show, you heard the jingle. It's time for the Global Countdown with Monocle's senior correspondent and musical curator, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Good afternoon, Fernando.
Good afternoon, Chris. I'm very excited for today's countdown.
I know you are very excited for today's countdown. This is one that is close to your heart. I'm gonna pull on your heartstrings here.
You will. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm celebrating the new issue of Confact, which is out today, is the summer issue. And for that edition, I spoke to Brazilian singer Julia Mestre. And her music used a lot of elements from the 70s and 80s in Brazil. So together with the piece, I did a little playlist.
You can't resist a playlist, can you?
You know, I am obsessed with playlists. So, of course, if you want to know the full playlist, you have to buy the issue. But I have a little selection here for you, Chris. I think you're going to like it.
You have a little selection, and I should say to our listeners that you have controversially, because this is Brazil, Fernando, you've gone for the top 6, haven't you? You just couldn't do the top 5. It had to be 6.
Absolutely. We have to be malleable here. Shall we start with a party song, though?
Okay. Party song is always a good place to start. Get us in the mood.
I agree. This is Rita Lee, the late Rita Lee. I mean, you can't talk about Brazilian pop music and rock without mentioning Rita Lee. She was genuinely our queen of rock. She's amazing. And this is one of her main hits from 1980. It's called Lança Perfume. I'll tell you actually the translation after. But first, let's dance a little bit. This is a song about celebrating life. In the video for it, she's rollerblading, so youthful. And Lança Perfume, if you translate, it's like throw perfume, but actually it's poppers, really. So that's what people use in Carnival in Brazil. Probably it's banned. I'm not, supporting anything here, but the song has a kind of this very joyful spirit, which is very, very Hitali.
So it's a carnival song as well, is that what we're saying?
Kind of.
It's general celebration, happiness, live life.
Exactly. And in Brazil, of course, we're known for bossa nova, samba, but I think Hitali brought some elements of rock music and pop, even a little bit of electronic as well. They can also be very Brazilian.
What do we have at number 5, Fernando? Moving on. Are we moving on from the party mood?
Yes, we're going to the beach. It's going to be a little bit more relaxed. Perfect for surfers. From 1983, the song was released and was on the radio every time. It is Lulu Santos, Como uma Onda, which is like a wave.
Nada do que foi será de novo do jeito que já foi dia. Tudo passa, tudo sempre passará. Na vida vem.
Sweet face.
Very sweet. I mean, it's basically Lulu Santos at that time. He was a bit of a surfer. He was very zen and kind of, he changes kind of music style throughout his career. He's still alive. He's still doing a lot of kind of new music, but this is the hit.
So this is like Brazilian surfer dude. Californian surfer dude has very different types of songs.
Absolutely. Have a caipirinha in hand and relax after you surf on the beaches of Rio de Janeiro.
Okay, I think we're going to another classic Brazilian next, aren't we? I can see the name here.
That's a powerful one. Honestly, I almost cried actually coming here to the studio listening to that. We're changing vibes again. This song was actually very important, was released during the dictatorship. And it talks about the repressed youth in Brazil. And it had the powerful vocals of Elis Regina. Even mentioning her name, oh my God, I have goosebumps a little bit. You understand why. The song's from 1976. I'll try to translate a bit after, but this is Elis Regina, Como Nossos Pais.
O meu coração já faz tempo eu vi você na rua, cabelo ao vento, gente jovem reunida na parede da memória. Essa lembrança é um quadro que dói mais.
I chose the live version so you can feel the energy in her voice. I think the lyrics are amazing. Of course, this is going to be too brief for our listeners, but she says, my pains to realize that despite having done everything we have done, we're still the same. And she meant the dictatorship, no matter how much people were trying to fight against it, it was still the same, at least at the time in 1976.
What is it about Elis Regina, Fernando? What does she mean to Brazil?
I think she means a lot to Brazil. I think, she had a bit of a troubled life, but it's just the vocals. It really touches everyone's soul. And you have to see her live performance. I mean, you have to see it on videos because, of course, unfortunately she died. But yeah, she is a true icon.
A true icon, and that's only number 4. Where do we go from there, Fernando?
I'm not even sure if I'm counting with who is the best or not. Today's a bit of an exception. And number 3, this is, I would describe it as bubblegum chic. This is when the new wave movement came to Brazil. And I don't know, and I think our language, Brazilian Portuguese, is quite breezy as well. I think it's a great combination, new wave and Brazil.
I don't know what bubblegum chic is, but let's have a listen first.
This is it. Kid de Abelha with Fixação.
Fixação, teus olhos no retrato. Fixação, minha assombração. Fixação, fantasmas no meu quarto. Fixação, I want to be alone.
Okay, that is the most classic 80s track we've had yet.
Yeah.
It's extremely 80s. If that's what bubblegum chic is, it's 80s.
It is 80s. It is 80s. And by the way, I love saying the word bubblegum, so I love, this is my overused word that I use. But shall we go back to the 70s now?
Okay, we're going back a decade,
and
sure.
We mentioned dictatorship here, but this song, don't worry, it's very breezy, very positive. But this band here, they were pure counterculture. I think one of their albums, which
isn't everything from the 70s?
Very much so. But they are very special. Their album Acabou Chorar from 1972 is known as one of the best albums ever, not just in Brazil. Even established magazines here would say that. It was a bunch of musicians. They met in a home in Salvador, and they had all those sessions, and they produced classics like this. Novos Baianos with A Menina Dança.
Quando cheguei, tudo estava virado. Apenas me viro, mas eu mesma viro os olhinhos. Só entro no jogo porque estou mesmo depois.
That is very 70s.
And that's what
I
I tell people. People should go and buy Compact and download all of those tracks, have a drink in hand, and that's exactly what I want to offer to our readers and listeners.
Well, we have one more, Fernando, and this is the big one from the person you interviewed as well.
I have to play. Basically, Julia Mestre, she just released her third solo album called Maravilhosamente Bem, which is marvelously well. And she told me that she chose this title because she smiles when she says it. And the music is like this. It is breezy. Of course, there's all the inspirations from the tracks we just played, but it's also very current as well.
We had to have one current one in there after the 70s and 80s.
So let's dance very brand new here with Julia Mestre, Maravilhosamente Bem.
Fernando, you do always say that sex is back.
Isn't it? And good Brazilian music is back as well.
Good Brazilian music is back.
I decided.
How much do we have in Confect? Extra songs you can listen to, the interview? Tell us just.
There's about 10 more. There's a big profile as well of Julia Mestre, beautiful photography. And the whole issue kind of feels very, very summery.
Do check out the summary issue of Confect on newsstands today. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much for joining us. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Laura Kramer, our researcher was Francesca Jilks, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.